It was supposed to be just another night, a routine shoot for the channel, me battling nature's fury in my custom van. I'd done it before. People love these videos, watching me face off against the elements while staying cozy in my little home on wheels. But tonight, the storm felt different, even from the start. I didn't realize how different until it was far too late. The storm had rolled in fast, faster than expected. I'd planned to get some B-roll before things got intense, shooting the calm before the chaos as I usually did. The snow had only just started to fall, light and soft, coating the world in a pristine blanket of white. The wind was picking up, making the air sharp and biting, but nothing too serious, yet. I grabbed my camera and stepped out of the van. My breath turned into clouds in front of me as I filmed the woods surrounding my parking spot. The trees stood tall, their branches heavy with the early snow, swaying slightly in the wind. The sound of the wind whistling through the forest was eerie, but I played it off as part of the experience. After a few shots of the van, I moved further away, wanting to capture the isolation, the wilderness. It's what my viewers loved, the sense that I was out there alone, fighting the elements. But as I stood there, framing up a shot of the van against the darkening sky, something changed. It wasn't the storm, not yet. The wind had picked up, sure, and the snow was starting to fall more heavily, but it wasn't that. It was a feeling, a sudden creeping dread that washed over me like ice water. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I swear, for a moment the forest felt alive, like something was watching me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone out there. I paused, lowering the camera for a moment, scanning the tree line. The wind rustled the branches, causing snow to fall in gentle cascades, but beyond that, nothing. No movement, no sound, just the wind. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered, and I couldn't help but feel like something was out there, just beyond the trees, hidden in the shadows. My breath caught in my throat. My heart beat a little faster as I tightened my grip on the camera, the lens still aimed at the van. I almost didn't want to turn my back on the forest. Something felt wrong. Then from the corner of my eye I saw movement, a flash of something dark slipping between the trees, so fast I could barely make it out. My body tensed. I whipped the camera toward it, heart pounding in my chest. I scanned the forest, zooming in on the shadows, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever it was. Nothing. Just trees, snow, and wind. I stood there for a long minute, every muscle in my body tense, listening. The wind howled, sending a sharp, cold gust against my face. My mind raced, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. A deer, maybe? A fox? The shadows playing tricks on me? Yeah, that had to be it. It's just the wind, I told myself. You're out here alone in a snowstorm. Your mind's playing games. But deep down I knew it wasn't just the wind. There was something out there. The feeling gnawed at me, but I pushed it aside. I had a video to make, and the storm was about to hit hard. I hurried back to the van, locking the doors behind me, trying to shake off the unease that had settled in my chest. I turned the camera back on, forcing a smile as I spoke to my audience, telling them about the storm, the snow, the cold, all the usual stuff. But that feeling, the creeping dread, wouldn't go away. As the storm grew worse, the van rocked in the wind and I started to feel more at ease. It was just the storm, just the wind. That's what I kept telling myself. But the night was far from over. Hours passed and the snow piled higher outside. I was filming an update, talking about how the storm was intensifying when I heard it. A screech, faint at first, but unmistakable. I paused mid-sentence, turning my head toward the window. The wind howled, rattling the windows, but the screech came again, louder this time. What the hell was that? I muttered, my voice barely above a whisper. I pointed the camera toward the window, showing the swirling snow outside. But all I saw was white. Maybe it was just the wind, scraping something against the van. That's when the knocking started. It wasn't a branch or snow falling from the roof. It was something solid, something deliberate, knocking against the van's side. I stood up, my heart racing. The camera was still rolling as I moved to the front of the van, peering out into the storm. Nothing, just endless snow. Then another knock, louder, from the back of the van. I jumped, spinning around, pointing the camera toward the rear. The knocking became more insistent, followed by that terrible screeching sound again. Metal against metal. My breath came in short, panicked gasps. I raced toward the front and turned on the headlights, flooding the snow-covered clearing with light. And then I saw it. Standing at the edge of the light, just beyond the trees, was the Wendigo. Tall, gaunt, its skin stretched tight over its bones, its eyes glowing with a cold, predatory light. It let out a shriek that cut through the howling wind, sending a wave of terror through me that I'd never felt before. I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking as I tried to start the van. The engine sputtered in the cold, refusing to turn over as the Wendigo stalked closer, its long, skeletal arms reaching out. The van rocked violently as it slammed its hand against the side, trying to get in. I floored the gas pedal, but the tires spun uselessly in the deep snow. The creature was right at the driver's window now, its face twisted in a grotesque grin, its claws dragging along the side of the van, leaving deep gouges in the metal. The Wendigo screeched, slamming into the back of the van, knocking the van forward. "Come on, come on!" I shouted as I bounced around in the seat, holding onto the steering wheel. Finally, the tires caught, and I shot forward, snow spraying behind me. I didn't look back, I didn't stop. I just drove, the storm fading behind me as the creature's screams echoed in the distance. When I finally reached the main road, I pulled over, my body trembling, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The van was scratched and battered, the windows fogged up from the cold. But I was alive. That was it, no more, I'm done. This was the last show. It's been 10 years since that day, but I still hear the screams, still feel the terror. My name's Lucas, and I was 16 when I lost my two brothers. This is a story I've never told anyone, and maybe I shouldn't be telling it now, but it's time to let it out. We grew up in a small town surrounded by thick woods. My older brother Jake was 18, and he had always been the tough one, the bully of the family, always picking on me and our younger brother Sam, who was 13. Jake thought he was invincible. You know the type, he couldn't be wrong and nothing could scare him. He made sure to remind us of that every day. In 2015, there was a rumor going around town. You see, deep in those woods, there lived an old woman. People said she was a witch, the kind of story that parents tell their kids to keep them from wandering too far. Stay out of the woods, my mom would warn, or the witch will get you. But there was more to it. People said she had a pet, something mean, something hungry that roamed the woods with her, waiting for anyone stupid enough to cross her. Of course, Jake didn't believe a word of it. He said it was all a bunch of nonsense to scare us, to make us behave. Sam, though, he was terrified. He wouldn't even go near the woods, and Jake would always mock him for it. "It's just an old hag in a shack," Jake would say, "probably living off the grid or something." But one afternoon, Jake had had enough of the rumors. "We're going to prove it's fake," he said, a determined look in his eyes. "You two are coming with me." He didn't ask, he demanded. I didn't want to go, but I wasn't going to let Sam go alone. So I went to keep an eye on him, even though our parents had told us time and time again to stay away from that part of the woods. We walked for what felt like hours, pushing through the dense trees and overgrown brush. Sam was already nervous, flinching at every little sound. I stayed close to him, trying to keep him calm, but Jake just marched ahead like this was all a joke to him. Finally, we found it, the old woman's house. It looked exactly how you'd imagine a witch's house would look. The windows were cracked, the roof sagging, and weeds grew wildly around the yard. The place felt wrong, like the air was heavier there. Jake, being Jake, didn't hesitate. He marched right up to the door and knocked. 3 loud bangs that echoed through the silent woods. I wanted to turn around to grab Sam and leave right then, but before I could, the door creaked open. The woman who stepped out was like something from a nightmare. Her back was hunched, her skin pale and leathery, with deep, sunken eyes that seemed to see right through you. Her voice was raspy, like nails scraping over stone. "What do you want?" she croaked, glaring at Jake. Jake, of course, wasn't intimidated. People say you're a witch, he said, smirking, and that you've got some kind of monster pet. Is that true? She didn't answer right away. Her eyes moved to me, then to Sam, who was trembling behind me. She looked back at Jake and stepped out of the doorway, leaning on an old broom. "Go home," she said, her voice low, "before you regret it." Jake laughed. "You're not scaring us, old lady. We're not leaving until you tell us the truth." I tried to pull him back, told him we should just leave her alone. But Jake shoved me off. He was getting angrier, pushing her for answers, getting more disrespectful with every word. That's when she snapped. The old woman raised her broom and swung it at Jake, trying to chase us off. But Jake, he pushed her down, hard. She hit the ground with a painful thud, and that's when I saw the look in her eyes. Not just anger. Something else. Something dark. As we took off running, she screamed after us, "You're going to pay for that." We ran, but not before I heard something else. Something deep, almost like a growl. I didn't say anything, hoping it was just my imagination. When we stopped to catch our breath, Jake and I got into it. I was furious. "What the hell is wrong with you? You pushed her down. She's an old woman." "She was crazy," Jake shot back, his chest heaving. "You saw her." But before we could argue anymore, Sam started freaking out. He grabbed my arm, his voice trembling. Lucas, there's something in the woods." I looked over, and that's when I saw it too. Something big, moving in the shadows, pacing back and forth like it was waiting for the right moment. The air suddenly felt colder, and then we heard it. A howl. A deep, guttural sound that pierced through the trees and made my blood run cold. Jake's face went pale, but he tried to brush it off. "It's nothing. Just a dog or something." But it wasn't just a dog. Out of the shadows, yellow eyes appeared, glowing, predatory eyes. The thing stepped forward, and my heart nearly stopped. It was huge, standing on two legs covered in matted fur. It looked like some kind of wolf, but it wasn't. It was something worse. Its teeth were sharp, its claws even sharper. I knew right away this was her pet, the thing the old woman had warned us about. "Run!" I screamed, but it was already too late. The creature lunged at Sam first, knocking him to the ground. He didn't even have time to scream before it tore into him. Blood splattered the trees, and I could hear bones snapping. I was frozen. My legs wouldn't move. Jake tried to help him, but the beast was too fast. It swiped at him, knocking him down like he was nothing. I watched in horror as it ripped him apart, literally tore him limb from limb. The woods were filled with their screams, and there was nothing I could do. I ran. I don't know how, but I ran faster than I ever thought possible. I didn't stop until I burst through the front door of our house, slamming it behind me and collapsing on the floor. The last thing I remember before passing out was the sound of that howl, echoing in the distance. I woke up in the hospital. My dad was sitting next to me, his face pale, his eyes full of sorrow. He told me that they had found pieces of my brothers. Their heads had been left on the porch, staring at the front door as if the creature had left them for me. Their bodies scattered in the woods. To this day, I don't go near the woods. I don't talk about what happened, but now you know. The witch and her dog were real, and they took my brothers from me. The end. When Emma and I planned our camping trip to Black Pine Forest, we were both eager for a weekend away from the grind of city life. Just 2 days of fresh air, no phones, no deadlines, just the sound of the wind rustling through the trees, the crackle of a campfire, and the occasional hoot of an owl. It was perfect, or so we thought. We arrived in the early afternoon, the sun filtering through the towering pines, casting long shadows that gave the forest a mysterious yet peaceful vibe. Emma loved the quiet, the stillness of it all. I did too, in a way, but there was something about this place, even in daylight, that felt heavy, as if the trees were watching us. We set up camp by a small clearing near a creek. The sound of water flowing over the rocks was calming, and the isolation was exactly what we were after. After a while, Emma started the fire while I went to gather more wood before it got dark. As I wandered deeper into the woods, I noticed how quickly the light was fading. There was something odd about the way the shadows stretched, like they were moving in ways they shouldn't. By the time I got back, the fire was going strong and the sun had dipped below the horizon. The temperature dropped fast, and the warmth of the fire became a welcome comfort. We cooked dinner, shared a bottle of wine, and talked about everything and nothing. It was the kind of night we needed, until it wasn't. It started with the sounds. At first they were faint, almost too distant to notice. A snapping twig here, a rustle of leaves there. Emma heard it too. She shot me a look, her smile fading. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice low. "Probably just a deer or something," I replied, trying to sound casual. But there was a tension in the air that made me doubt my own words. I tried to shake it off, thinking it was just the forest playing tricks on us. But the sounds didn't stop. They grew louder, closer. Footsteps slow and deliberate, like something or someone was circling us. Emma stood up, staring into the darkness beyond the fire's glow. "Do you think it's another camper?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "There shouldn't be anyone else out here," I said, feeling the unease creeping into my chest. We had deliberately picked a remote spot. No one should have been anywhere near us. Suddenly there was a low growl, not the kind you'd expect from a wolf or a bear. This was different, inhuman, guttural. Emma grabbed my arm, her fingers digging into my skin. "What the hell was that?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know," I said, trying to keep calm, but my heart was pounding. I grabbed the flashlight and shone it into the trees, scanning the forest for any sign of movement. But all I could see were the long shadows cast by the trees. Nothing moved, but the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. The growl came again, louder this time, closer. I turned to Emma, whispering, "We need to get to the car. Now!" She nodded, her face pale in the firelight. We quickly doused the fire, trying to move quietly, but it was impossible not to make noise. The footsteps followed us, heavy and deliberate. Whatever was out there was getting closer. We didn't run, not yet. But we walked faster, sticking close together. I could feel Emma trembling, and I was doing my best to keep it together, but I was terrified too. I'd heard stories about these woods, old legends about creatures that lived in the deep forests, but I never believed any of it. Not until that night. As we neared the edge of the clearing, something moved in the trees. I caught a glimpse of it in the moonlight, a tall, emaciated figure, its eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. It stood on two legs, its body twisted and unnaturally long. And the smell. God, the smell. Like something that had been rotting for weeks. It let out a screech, high-pitched and piercing, a sound that made every hair on my body stand on end. Emma screamed, and we bolted. I grabbed her hand, pulling her as fast as I could toward the trail that would lead us back to the car. The footsteps behind us quickened, and I could hear the thing crashing through the underbrush, closing in. We ran through the woods, the branches scratching at our skin, the undergrowth trying to trip us. My lungs burned, but I didn't stop. Emma was barely keeping up, her breath coming in ragged gasps. I could hear the creature behind us, its wheezing breaths and the sickening sound of its claws scraping against the trees. It was toying with us, letting us think we had a chance before it would finally make its move. Just as we broke through the tree line, I saw headlights, dim and distant, but enough to make me shout for help. A figure stepped into the beam of light, a forest ranger. He waved, shouting something I couldn't make out over the pounding in my ears. We sprinted toward him, and as we reached the road, I dared a glance behind us. The creature had stopped at the edge of the trees, its glowing eyes locked on us. It let out one last growl before disappearing into the darkness, as if the presence of another person had driven it away. The ranger hurried over, his face a mix of confusion and concern. "You two okay?" he asked, looking us over. There was something," I stammered, struggling to catch my breath. "In the woods. It was chasing us." The ranger's face grew serious. "Get in the truck," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Now." We didn't argue. Once we were in the truck, he drove us to the nearest ranger station. We didn't say much on the ride there. Emma was shaking, her hands gripping mine so tightly that her knuckles were white. I was still trying to process what had happened. When we reached the station, the ranger asked us to describe what we saw. I told him everything, the sounds, the growl, the creature. He listened carefully, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "You're not the first ones to see something out there," he said, his voice low. "And you probably won't be the last." I stared at him, disbelief and fear mixing in my gut. "What was it?" He hesitated for a moment before answering. "There are stories about these woods, about creatures that shouldn't exist. Some people call them Wendigos. Most folks don't believe in that sort of thing. But after what you've been through, I'd say it's best if you don't come back here again." We didn't need to be told twice. That night changed everything. Emma and I never spoke about it again, not really. We left Black Pine Forest behind, but sometimes, late at night, I still hear that growl in my dreams. And when I do, I wake up in a cold sweat, knowing that Wendigos are real, and they're still out there. Thank you all for tuning in to Cryptid Encounters. I truly appreciate your support in listening to these thrilling stories. If you enjoyed the content, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. If there are any stories you'd love to see covered, feel free to comment below with your suggestions. Until next time.